Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest edition of the CF Illinois Town Hall series. Today, we are featuring advocacy as our topic of discussion, and we have a great panel of experts, both local and national. A few housekeeping notes. Please make sure to keep your line muted during the conversation. Use the chat feature to submit any questions, and we'll do our best to answer everybody's questions by the end of the call, time permitting. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Will Covert, our resident advocacy expert for the Chicago and Peoria chapters. I'll turn it over to Will so he can introduce all of our other panelists, and we'll get started.
Great. Thanks, David. As David just said, for those of you who don't know me, I think you know about everyone on the call. My name is Will Covert. I'm up here in Chicago, the Greater Illinois chapter, and I work with all of our advocates here in Illinois, including those on our advocacy committee, which you'll be hearing about more here in a little bit. And yeah, I'm very happy for the speakers we have on today's town hall. Thank you for everyone for joining us today to learn more about advocacy and what we're doing on the federal and state level. And we have Scott Sherwood, who's a policy specialist from the Foundation's national office in Bethesda, who's going to be speaking about the federal level and give some big overviews of CF advocacy. Christy Clow, who is our advocacy chair for the state of Illinois and the Greater Illinois chapter, is going to be talking about different ways to get involved here locally in the state level. And we have Shannon Hawksworth, who's a CF mom from the Peoria area, who's going to be speaking about her experience, her CF story, how she got involved with advocacy, and we're glad to have Shannon on today's call with us too. So without any further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Scott Sherwood to talk. So Scott, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And as mentioned previously, if you want to drop your questions into the chat box, I can try and answer them throughout, but I'll be on the call if there's any questions at the end as well. Thank you for everyone taking the time to join the webinar today and just get a little bit more background and understanding of the Foundation's advocacy work. It's such an important component of what the Foundation is trying to accomplish. Through the amazing work of fundraisers and volunteers and everyone that's on this call dedicated to the CF mission, we've developed amazing therapies, amazing treatments that have changed the lives of people with cystic fibrosis. That's only half the battle. People don't have affordable access to those treatments and to that care. And that's where advocacy comes in. That's where we reach out to lawmakers on the federal and the state level, decision makers, and make sure that they're understanding of how their decisions affect people with cystic fibrosis, and making sure that people have affordable access to the high quality care that people with CF need to maintain their health. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish. Specifically, we work with volunteers throughout the country. It's really helpful to have personal experience. The Policy and Advocacy Team from the Bethesda office that I'm a part of, we send a lot of communication to the Hill and to state legislators. We provide letters, we provide testimony, we provide comments and stats. But one of the most effective things that we can provide are patients that actually fight this fight every single day and can provide that perspective. And that perspective really paints the picture for these decision makers to really try to understand what it is actually like to fight and to live with cystic fibrosis every day. So, today we'll talk a little bit about like CF Advocacy 101, all the things that we're trying to do, things that we've done in the past. And then we're going to talk about ways to get involved. And Shannon and Christy are going to talk about their involvement, ways they've participated in advocacy. And I hope that you think about that as, how can I get involved, and what are some of the easy ways that I can lend my voice to this? Because every voice does make a difference and does help us amplify the needs of people with CF. So just talking about like the basics. So what is advocacy? I think there's often this misconception that to be an effective advocate, you have to have like a law degree or a background in government and politics, but that's not the case. We don't get into the political piece of this. We advocate for people with CF. We go in there to talk about cystic fibrosis. All of our meetings and our conversations are about people, not politics. We focus on people with cystic fibrosis. So that's our role. And anyone can be an advocate. So if you've talked to a doctor, if you've talked to a teacher, if you've explained CF to someone that wasn't as familiar, all of those instances are some form of advocacy. And it's really kind of doing the same exact thing, but providing that education to a decision maker. So whether that's at whether that's a member of Congress or a state legislator, or just anyone that needs to better understand the disease, that's all we're doing, is we're providing that education, and we're telling people what issues are most important to the CF community. So we always like to think about it as just like providing that education and trying to make sure that the people that are making these decisions are aware of the impact of their choices. So when we think about from the foundation's perspective, we're tracking legislation at the state level and at the federal level, and we're always looking at legislation through the lens of how will this affect people with CF, and is this good for people with CF? And it kind of boils down to, like, we call them our 3 A's. So I've mentioned them already, but around accessibility, affordability, and adequacy. So those are kind of the 3 pillars of what we lean into, what we weigh in on, what we find like kind of a bit of sum up what's really important for care for people with CF. Kind of leans into those 3 pieces. So when we think about accessibility, we want to make sure that people have access to the treatments that they need. We want to make sure that people aren't denied access because they were born with a pre-existing condition, for example. So we want to make sure that people have that access, but we also want to make sure that that access is affordable. So making sure that affordability is not a barrier to access, because if it's not affordable, then it's not true access. So we want to make sure that people are able to receive the care that they need with as little barriers as possible. And then adequacy. We want to make sure that's the right care. The CF Foundation, and we've discovered what treating CF looks like, and it's taken a long time. But through our care centers that we work with and scientists and the research that we've done, we've really increased our knowledge of the disease and the right ways to take care of people with CF. And we know that there's highly specialized treatments that need to be involved. And so when we think about like making sure that people have treatments, we have to make sure that's the right treatments, that they're receiving the care that's going to change their lives and be as effective as possible. So that's kind of like, if I had to sum up, what are the issues that we look at? How do we weigh in on these? We kind of use that framework of affordability, accessibility, and adequacy. And we've been successful. Our advocates are passionate, and we have been successful over the last several years on a number of issues. I'll just mention a couple just briefly. An issue that we advocate for a long time was around newborn screening. So making sure that, at birth or close to, children were tested for CF and other rare diseases. And this has been tremendous. And we now have newborn screening in all 50 states. But this has changed the early detection of the disease, which makes sure that people get on the right track and on the right treatments as early as possible. And this has been a really significant improvement in the care that we've seen over the last couple of years, has been kind of around that idea of just getting the early detection in place. Because before newborn screening, oftentimes people would go misdiagnosed for decades. I've met people that were diagnosed in their late 20s or 30s, and they were completely told that they're consistently told that it was bronchitis or asthma, when really they've been fighting this disease that affects their entire body. So newborn screening was a big win. Here in Illinois, just 2.5 years ago, I believe, if I'm keeping track, maybe 3 years ago at this point, advocates here made it possible to get enzymes in schools passed, a bill that allowed school children to be able to take their enzymes in school without issues, without having to see a nurse, to be able to just comfortably take it. Our children with CF have been taking enzymes for a long time, and so part of that was just being able to give them the freedom to be able to take those treatments at lunch when they need to use those. Some of the other issues that we've weighed in at a federal level, we typically ask the federal government to make sure that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the NIH, the National Institute of Health, make sure that those 2 agencies are properly funded. So the NIH, that's a place where they do research, and we partner with the NIH on some research projects to really grow our understanding of the disease and grow our understanding of what CF is and ways to treat it. And then the Food and Drug Administration is where like future therapies are approved, and they go through the approval and review process before that it can be confirmed that they're safe and effective enough to be made public. So we typically advocate for robust funding for both of those programs, those agencies. And for example, in 2019, when Trikafta was approved, that was streamlined through the FDA because it was properly funded, and it was approved roughly 5 months in advance. It previously had a deadline of about March 2021, and that got into the hands of people with CF at the end of October into early November of 2019. And so that was a big win, and it was great to be able to talk to people that were able to utilize that treatment in those early months. And we came back from the holidays and early into January, and just to already hear the differences in people with CF and how it had changed their lives, it was great to be able to get that into their hands even 5 months sooner made such a difference. So those are some of the past wins. I know Christy and Shannon will probably share some of their experience advocating at either through the foundations, events, or participating in some of the other outreach that we've done. But I'll briefly touch on some of the ways to get involved. The easiest way to get involved in our advocacy is to sign up for advocacy alerts. This is where we'll send you an email, we'll send you a text, depending on what you prefer, when there's an issue that comes up. So we'll send you a quick synopsis of that legislation, of that issue, and then we'll have a pre-written message already there, typed out, ready to go. You can always customize it. We encourage you to customize it and make it your own, make it personalized. But you put in your information and it's ready to go, and it will go out to whoever it's supposed to. The state issue will go out to your representatives from the state level, your senators on the state level. We'll make sure it gets to the right person. But signing for advocacy alerts is the easiest way to get involved. You can do this. We'll put this in the chat, but you can text Fight CF, all one word, Fight CF, to the phone number 96387. So if you send that phrase to that number, you'll get a link back. Click that link, put your name and email address and how you want to receive communications, and it'll easily sign you up for that. And that's the easiest way. So that's where we streamline and send you information. One of the things that we do on that as well is invite you to these calls that we have that give our community an update on what are some of the issues that we've been watching in the last couple of weeks. What are some of the issues that we're seeing come up on Capitol Hill or in state houses. And then we tell the community, here are some ideas. These are ways to engage. These are the things that we'll ask you to do. And so we host those webinars by senior leadership, typically every 4 to 6 weeks or so. So those are a great opportunity to join those calls. If you can't join live, we record them, and you can click the registration and then just receive the recording later. But we send those invites out. As long as you're signed up for advocacy alerts, you should receive those. So that's a great way to stay in touch with the specific work that we're dealing with. Another program I'll touch on briefly here is our Congressional Captains Program. This is a new infrastructure that the foundation has put on over the last year and a half or so, around the idea that we have great relationships with members of Congress, and we have fantastic volunteers that have helped us do that. In Illinois, we have several of those that have built strong relationships with their House of Representative member, and we want to replicate that throughout the country. So we want to identify one volunteer in all 435 congressional districts in the nation to build a relationship with that member of Congress, and then to talk to other people in their district to get involved with advocacy. We know that there's power in numbers, and if that captain in that district can talk to 5, 10, 15 other people to sign up for advocacy alerts in their district, that can really help grow and amplify our issues and show support on the specific policy priorities that we're trying to weigh in on. So that's a really important program that we've been launching. We've done a great job working with Will and Christy in Illinois. So if you're interested in getting involved with that program, definitely reach out to us, and we're happy to bring you on board as either a team member or potentially a captain as well. So those are kind of the big issues. Those are the ways to get involved. I'll touch on briefly is a current issue that we're watching. And we're starting to weigh in on antimicrobial resistance. And we know that the lungs of people with CF, that mucus, it builds up around the lungs and becomes a breeding ground for hard to treat infections. And some of these infections are resistant to antibiotics. And so we know that this is a huge issue for our community. So we started the education and reaching out and talking to members of Congress about why we need more options for antibiotics. Antibiotics, they can become resistant. Some of them are already resistant, but over time they become more resistant. And a lot of people with CF are continuing to fight this, and they don't have as many tools as they need to fight these infections. And it's not just an issue that affects CF people, but it's also an issue that affects Americans. So I think the number is 2.8 million Americans fight a hard to treat infection that's antibiotic resistant each year. And one American every 5 minutes dies of an infection that's antibiotic resistant. So we're trying to talk to members of Congress and build momentum on this issue. There's actually a current proposal out there called the Pasteur Act that we're asking members of Congress to co-sponsor and support and eventually bring to the floor and to hopefully bring into work that would help build a robust pipeline of antibiotic options, not just for people with CF, but for others to use as well. So that's one of the current initiatives that we're watching and monitoring at this time. And this is going to be an ongoing thing. As a lot of us know, Congress can move pretty slowly. So they've got a lot of things at the top of their list, and we're kind of right there at just below some of their top priorities. So we've had a lot of conversations with members of Congress about this issue, building momentum, and we're looking forward to seeing some of this action brought to light at the end of the year or towards the start of Q1 into 2022. So I did a lot of speaking. Feel free to chat in with any questions, or like I said, I'll be on at the end of the call for questions as well. But I'm looking forward to turning the mic over to Christy, who will can shed some light on what she's done and how we've been so successful in Illinois. She's been a tremendous part of the efforts that we've done here in the state.
Thank you, Scott. I have to tell you, Scott, I really loved when you started out talking about the fact that like every time we talk to our doctors and our teachers and our friends in our community about how that's like advocacy. And I feel like that is such a great way to think about that, because I think all of us in the CF community have become very accustomed to having to do that, right? And very comfortable with it, right? We know we have to be the ones that like speak up and tell everybody what's going on. Otherwise, how would anybody else be able to walk in our shoes and know what's happening? That was perfect. I have to tell you, like for me, it felt like that was kind of how the advocacy began. Of course, you start talking to your friends and your family about what's going on in your life. And it's kind of amazing how many people all of a sudden like step forward and want to like help and respond and do something about that, right? I mean, like, we've all had those experiences where we've sort of told our story and then somebody who you kind of wouldn't really expect like suddenly makes a huge donation to your Great Strides campaign, or, a teacher or a doctor really steps up and sort of, sits down with you and like talks you through what's going on and how you can move forward and what the best next steps are, and asks you, oh my gosh, like asks you like, how can I help? And you're like, oh gosh, I don't know. I thought I was alone in this, right? Well, for me, this all kind of started 5 years ago with my daughter, Elizabeth, when she was diagnosed. Of course, that was 2016. And anybody who's kind of on this call might remember that was also a big year for advocacy, because that was also when the ACA was being voted on to have it repealed. I was in a panic, right? I had a newborn baby. She was one of a twin. So I had two newborn babies. Only one of them had CF, but I was in a panic just all around trying to keep my head above water. And the thought of somebody pulling our healthcare, my husband and I are both self-employed. So the ACA being repealed would have been a huge, huge problem for our insurance policy, because that would have been eliminated. We would have had to go find a new policy. None of them included Lurie, which is where we were getting our care. There was, a lot of elements to that were just so frightening. And my sister said to me, you should call your senators. And I responded kind of dumbfounded, like, how do you do that? And why, wait, will they actually take my call? And yeah, sure enough, they did. I thought that was, to me, kind of like startling that, my senators took my call and invited me to their office and wanted to hear what was going on, and spend an unbelievable amount of time listening to our story and asking questions and taking a real interest. I feel like that in and of itself was super empowering. And, kind of gave me a sense of control over this situation that felt really out of control to me, and gave me a sense that there's something that I can be doing here to like help this along. And these people need me in order to make these decisions. So they can't know what's happening in their constituents' lives unless we tell them. And then I think after that, I realized that the foundation had this really well set up structure for how to help you do this, which is great for those staffers, those poor guys that caught me on my first meeting. I mean, I talked their ear off in all different directions, and the foundation has been able to kind of help organize me a little bit in my thoughts and in my message to the lawmakers so I can be more effective and have these programs like the Pasteur Act, like when we were pulling for newborn screenings to be renewed, those types of things, you know, having a real message to give these lawmakers just made that even more impactful and easier for me as an advocate to go in there and just tell my story and then just hand them some of the foundation information. I didn't have to know, you know, all about antimicrobials, or I didn't have to know exactly, you know, the details of the newborn screenings or the Enzyme Act or any of these things. The foundation kind of did such a nice job of pulling all that information together for me so I could be an effective advocate. And that was something that, you know, to me, I felt really passionate about. I really wanted to be more involved, and I saw the importance, I saw the power in it. Now, not everybody wants to be that involved, and that's okay. I think they're also set up a really great system here so that people can be as involved or not as involved as they want. And the advocacy alerts, I would say, is that first level. If you are in the CF community or know anybody in the CF community, that is a really painless. If you're not on that list, I want you to grab your phone right now. You know, in the chat is all the information. Just text CF Fight CF into there and get those advocacy alerts coming to your phone. They will literally send you a very simple message. Once something comes up, you will just click, yes, I want to send a message to my lawmakers, and they will give you all the details. They'll fill in the addresses. They'll fill in who your lawmakers are. They'll let you know what the message is. You can customize it a little bit if you want. But I think there's, you know, an inkling to think, well, I don't know that that really matters. Does it really make a difference if I send a text message? It does. They're actually keeping track. Those offices are keeping track of how many people contacted them each day about each different issue. And if we're sending an organized kind of group of people and all of them on those days going through and saying, this is important to us and we need you to pay attention to this, it moves to the top of their list. So that is hands down the easiest no-brainer. If you're not on that list, you need to be on that list. But there's so many other ways that you can get involved beyond that if you want. And one of them, I know Scott kind of touched on the fact that we have this Congressional Captains Program. I mean, you know, if you think about how amazing that is, that the foundation has put together this organized system of captains in each district, in each state to be ready to go. I mean, you have to think of us as being a little bit of like an army ready and waiting. You know, right now there may not be a major issue that we're trying to tackle like the ACA repeal, but this, you know, antimicrobial work is so important. And when the time comes and it's ready for them to make, you know, the call on this, we need to be organized and ready to get into their offices, to have those messages ready to go, to have the stories behind it, to give them a reason to get involved. So anyhow, the Congressional Captains Program is kind of that top tier. If you really want to get involved and you really want to be, you know, out there and one of the faces of advocacy and talking to your lawmakers, contact me, contact Will. We can talk you through a little bit more of what the details of it are and how you can be more involved. But if you're just not sure and you're thinking, I don't know if I'm ready for that, I don't know if I'm really prepared enough for that, I'll tell you, you probably are more prepared than you think. But you can also, as well as getting those advocacy alert emails that Scott was talking about, if you just send me or Will your information, we can put you on our Illinois newsletter. And that gives you a little bit more of a targeted sort of piece of information about what's happening in Illinois, as well as what's happening with national. On top of the newsletter, we do quarterly meetings for the advocacy group. You're certainly welcome to join that meeting and just listen in on what's happening, get to know a few of the other advocates, hear what they're doing, hear how it's, you know, effective it's been for them or what things haven't been effective for them. But I'll tell you, it's so important. As much as the fundraising is key to the foundation and spreading that message is key, these are places where we can make some big differences, keeping that consistent healthcare and insurance, getting the antimicrobial funding out there and get it going. And, you know, making sure that the protections are in place for our friends and our family and the CF community. I think I've also said a mouthful here too. I think I even beat out Scott and, you know, having a lot to say here. But I just, you know, I want to really encourage you guys and inspire you guys to know how much power you have and how interested these lawmakers are in hearing from you, and how wonderful the foundation is about being able to help you and organize you and give you all the tools that you need to sort of really be an effective advocate. So that's sort of my story and where I've been. I know Shannon has kind of a little bit different perspective that she can bring to this too. So I'd like to kind of turn it over to Shannon to sort of share some of her story. But please, I'm going to put my information in the chat as well. If anybody would like to reach out to me, you have some questions or you want some more information about advocacy, I'd love to talk to you about it. So thank you guys for being here and thanks for listening. Shannon, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Like Christy said, we all have kind of a different story. And I think sometimes we think our story maybe isn't valuable enough to be told because it's, because you kind of tend to downplay what, as a CF parent, I think we tend to downplay what we go through on a daily basis, what our children go through. My daughter Harper she'll be 10 next week. She is, in all accounts, a typical, when you look at her from the outside, a typical little girl. She plays softball, she does gymnastics, she runs around with her friends. And sometimes you think, oh, they don't want to hear that story because she's doing so well. She doesn't look like she's sick. She doesn't look like she needs help. But then you start to think that she is the way she is because of all of the advancements that we have, because people have fought for treatments and helped fundraise for scientific research, and her life is getting better and better every day because of the work that people are putting in with the CF Foundation and advocates around the country. And I kind of, sometimes you don't even realize that you benefit from this work that's been done before you became a part of the CF world. Harper had surgery the day she was born, and it was, she had a malrotated intestines. And when they did her surgery, they came back and said, it does not look like cystic fibrosis to us, so we aren't going to treat it as that. And then I guess a little less than 2 weeks, about 7 or 8 days later, her newborn screen came back and showed that she did have cystic fibrosis. And at the time, I didn't even realize that was a thing, that she was tested as a baby, as a newborn. And so I think they would have treated her differently, and she maybe wouldn't have got the care. She ended up having 3 more surgeries after that and spent, 2 more months, almost 2 months in the NICU. And I'm not quite sure that they would have treated her the same and she would have got the care.
We may have lost Shannon there for a moment.
We have 2 older children, and so we realized that they had both, had a newborn screen too, so we didn't have to go back and get them tested. That was already done, so we didn't have to do additional testing on them either. But we also started out, we kind of slowly got into the CF community. Started out first with volunteering at local events, and became good friends with the people in our local chapter. And that's kind of how we got our support group. And then little by little, as time goes on, I became part of the parental advisory board for our hospital. And then I learned more and more that I learned other people's stories, and it became important to me to help something that might not affect me, or I don't think it's going to affect me, is affecting someone else. And so I wanted to get involved in a way to help them and, really just champion the cause and help them get things that they needed and not necessarily stuff that I needed right at that point. So it was kind of nice to get a different perspective and realize that just because it's not affecting us right now doesn't mean it won't affect us later. And there are things that we can do. Like Christy said, the first way we got involved with advocacy was just the alerts. And you don't realize how powerful that is, just to send off, it takes you 2 minutes, not even, to send off an email or a text. They make it so simple for you to get involved that way. But yet it has a big impact and you don't even realize how much you're helping. And I just am really glad that I've started to become more involved. It's been easier than I realized, because you get overwhelmed and you think, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't, we have 3 children and busy lives, and there's just so many little things that you can do to help and to bring more awareness. We talk about it every day, and you don't think about that as being advocacy, but it really is. And the more we can help, the better. And the CF, like Christy said, the CF Foundation makes it easy for us to do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. And thank you, Christy, for sharing those passionate and informative, stories, how you got involved. And obviously your personal connection means a lot to us. So I hope if we have some questions out there, I didn't see any come into the chat, but I'd like to invite everybody to feel free to unmute yourself or open your video if you'd like to ask any of our panelists any questions or share a personal advocacy experience of your own. I know we have some other dedicated advocates on this call. So if anybody, I think we have a few grandparents, if they'd like to share any of their information or their experience with our advocacy efforts.
I was going to jump in and just share a little recent experience with some work that we've done. Shannon and Christy both joined a call that we had. We scheduled 2 separate calls with Illinois legislators. And I was looking at the list of people that were lawmakers that were planning on attending the call and which volunteers we had in their districts. And Shannon was one of them, and a constituent of one of them for our downstate call that we have to educate lawmakers there. And then Christy was in the Chicago area, so I reached out to her. And they both did a fantastic job. This was just kind of like a CF 101. We had roughly 10 legislators on both of those calls. And we just talked to them about the needs of CF, some of the advancements that we've seen in the last couple of years. And we were able to have the 2 of them, on their perspective call, share the experience. And that landed so well for these lawmakers. And I heard back when we thanked them for attending about like, wow, it was really helpful to hear from the volunteers and share what it's like to fight CF every day. It's a disease that if maintained, like you might not know that someone has CF, but behind the scenes, I didn't know that they did the best treatments. I didn't know how many pills they took or the enzymes with every meal. So that's just a great example of the work that our advocates are doing.
Excellent, thanks. And I was one of my aha takeaways was the fact that our officials record and track, these touch points that the community gives them. I guess I didn't really think about that. So that was really interesting. Do we have any questions from the attendees online here? I don't see any in there. Well, if there are no questions and for our panelists today, I guess we will give you back some lunchtime back to your schedule today. And I'd like to thank Scott and Christy and Shannon again for all of their efforts, but especially for sharing the information provided today. I'd like to thank Will for kind of wrangling all of our panelists today and getting this going. This was an important message that we needed to get out to the community. I hope everybody, if you haven't already, will text Fight CF to 96387. Hopefully I got that right. But I will be sending out a recorded link of this session to all the panelists, as well as on our social media pages for our chapter. So if you did miss any of it, feel free to review the recording. And with that, I will say thank you all again for tuning in today, and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.